If you were standing near Neptune when the Voyager probe flew by, the radio noise would have been loud enough to rip the headphones clean off your head. You look at the raw data sheets pulled from file NRO-DO89 and stare at the numbers that came back from the edge of the solar system. The news stories fed to the public said the planet was just a big quiet ball of blue gas and freezing ice storms. But as you run your fingers over the original data logs, you realize the probe was hit by a massive gravity pull that the official papers tried to write off as a computer glitch. You look closely at the path logs from 4 billion miles away, where the tracking sensors showed the probe suddenly lose speed without any clear reason. The space agency told everyone this was just a simple math mistake made by the ground team in California a few days before. Yet the internal fuel logs showed no thruster burns and zero cold gas being used that could explain why the probe slowed down. Ask yourself why a metal box moving at 40,000 miles an hour would suddenly lag as if something was dragging it back toward the clouds. The chief data worker wrote a short warning note in red pencil right on the front page of the log, saying the weight of the planet was completely wrong. You check the security papers attached to the back of the file and see that 4 radar workers were moved to different jobs the very next week. The bosses did not lock down the tape rooms and clear the halls just to hide a small math error made on an orbit chart. They scrambled to seal the files because those flight numbers proved a huge heavy mass was sitting inside the atmosphere pulling on the probe. Look at the scan papers signed under code CIA-89 just before the main radio line was cut and sent over to a secure military server. The sensors did not find normal magnetic background noise. They found a tight beam of low radio signals firing in a repeating cycle. These signals came in sharp bursts that lined up perfectly with a math pattern, while the clouds around it were spinning in different directions. Textbooks claimed Neptune was a dead world of cold wind, but something under the fog was throwing out massive amounts of electrical energy. When you flip to the raw spectrum logs pulled from the magnetic sensors, the official story about a simple gas planet falls apart right on your desk. The magnetic lines around Neptune do not wrap cleanly around the top and bottom like every other planet orbiting our sun in the dark void. The whole field was tilted sideways 60 degrees, creating a twisted shape that pulsed every time the probe moved closer to the cloud deck. That heavy twist in the magnetic shield is the exact mark of a massive artificial power source working deep beneath the ice. If you listen to the audio tapes recorded from the big satellite dishes in Australia, you hear the quiet click of magnetic reels turning in the dark. The worker reading the numbers out loud sounds calm at first as he tracks the weak signal coming from the edge of space. You hear the deep hum of the metal dishes turning in the night to keep a lock on the probe 4 billion miles away. But 20 minutes into the flyby, his voice goes dead silent as the signal meters jump off the charts and peg hard against the stops. That sudden needle jump on the paper roll forces you to pause the tape and grab the notes locked inside the NRO-92 archive folder. The radio bursts coming out of the blue clouds were not made by lightning hitting ice crystals high in the atmosphere. They came in tight, timed cycles that needed a massive power output far bigger than all the sunlight hitting the planet in a whole year. For 30 years, books told you Neptune was powered only by weak heat from the core, but these files show an active power station working inside. You start lining up the gravity drop charts with the temperature readings taken by the cameras during the closest pass over the planet. As the probe flew over the big dark storm spot, the heat sensors saw a sudden jump of 30 degrees over an area hundreds of miles wide. The engineers expected to find a freezing ice mix that got colder as the storm moved into the dark part of the planet. Instead, the dark spot was pumping out heat like a giant furnace through a process that had nothing to do with wind friction. What happened next was pulled from library shelves and hidden in a locked storage room in Maryland for over 35 years. The camera team did not take normal pictures of weather clouds. They caught a solid radar bounce off something sitting still under the upper gas layer. The dark shape under the clouds did not drift with the 2,000-mile-an-hour winds blowing around it in the upper atmosphere. On the internal intercom tape, you hear a scientist say a single clear sentence before the audio track cuts to loud static. "That thing is not moving." Then came a long silence on the radio link, while ground computers tried to figure out why the probe was 3 miles off its path. The tracking numbers showed the Voyager had been pulled off course by a huge, heavy, unseen mass hiding inside the storms. It was as if a heavy anchor was sitting in the liquid gas, holding its ground against the fastest winds in the whole solar system. When the probe cleared the planet's shadow hours later, the official story was rewritten, the weight numbers were changed, and Neptune was called a simple ball of gas. Now look at what happened decades later when college researchers ran new math on the old flight paths using modern computer systems. The new trajectory runs proved the weight numbers published by NASA in 1989 were off by a huge amount, nearly 1 full percent. The The space agency quietly put out papers admitting their old Voyager mass estimates were wrong, blaming a simple sensor mistake made during the flyby. But if you check those new weight corrections against the old magnetic logs, you realize the original numbers were changed on purpose. Think about how huge a 1% error is when you are calculating the total weight of a giant planet that is 4 billion miles away. It means millions of tons of heavy material were missing during the flyby, sitting exactly where the radar saw that solid anchored shape. Your own body counts on gravity working the same way every day, but this mass was bending space around the planet in ways books cannot explain. The agency did not read the tools wrong. They faked the public weight numbers to cover up the solid structure sitting in the fog. This is where your chest gets tight, because you realize they did not alter the Neptune data to hide a broken sensor or save face over a mistake. They locked down the files because admitting a solid, super heavy structure sits inside those clouds proves that unexplainable things are out there. If a stationary object can hold its ground against 2,000-mile-an-hour winds while blasting out radio beams, it is not a natural gas cloud. The astronomical world stayed quiet, because the truth meant burning every planet model they ever built. Hit the subscribe button right now and leave a comment below if you want us to keep pulling old file boxes and showing you what is hidden behind closed doors. Your support is the only thing that keeps this channel digging through locked storage rooms, connecting forgotten clues, and bringing you the truth every single week. Look at the sudden shift in deep space tracking and powerful new radar testing that took place across defense labs right after the Neptune flyby. Private flight companies started building specialized high-frequency radar dishes and deep space tracking systems behind closed fences in the desert. The public was told these massive radio tools were built to track asteroids near Earth and monitor weather satellites orbiting our own ground. Yet the technical build sheets show directional receivers tuned to the exact radio frequency Voyager recorded coming out of Neptune's storms. Why spend hundreds of millions of dollars building deep space receiver dishes tuned to a single dark frequency coming from the furthest planet in our system? Because monitoring a world with a fixed power source means watching an active generator that operates under principles we do not understand. If a research team can decode the pattern behind those low radio bursts, they get access to energy concepts that make standard rocket fuel totally useless. The secret was kept under tight lockdown to make sure no other nation picked up those long-range signals first. Look at the pictures taken by the Hubble Space Telescope years after the Voyager probe left the outer system behind in the dark void. The dark blue storm spot that had been stable for decades suddenly vanished from the upper atmosphere, leaving behind a smooth blue surface with zero breaks. When astronomers checked the deep radar returns, the heavy stationary mass was still sitting in the exact same physical coordinates under the gas layer. That 30-mile mass did not disappear into the liquid core. It just shut down its upper heat release and went totally silent. Here is the most scary detail pulled from inner planning papers long after the original Voyager team was broken up and sent to other jobs. In the spring of 2018, a leaked proposal sheet from a joint planetary research group showed plans for a new heavy probe designed to drop deep radar units into Neptune. The public news release claimed the mission was meant to study basic weather patterns and measure ice levels deep in the mantle, but the secret equipment list attached to the back of the file included heavy magnetic field detectors built to map hardened structures hidden under liquid gas. The real truth of what was recorded during that cold flyby in August 1989 hits you like a cold blast of air late at night in a quiet room. When the Voyager 2 swept past the blue clouds of Neptune, it did not find an empty ice world spinning alone in the dark void. It flew directly past a massive artificial energy core anchored inside the atmosphere, throwing out signals that bent the magnetic field around the whole planet. The flight workers who read those first raw printouts realized that our solar system is not an empty desert, but a place containing things we cannot explain. You close the heavy paper folder and push it back into the steel cabinet as the lights flicker overhead in the empty office. The space agency did not admit their Voyager data was wrong because of a simple math mistake made by tired workers 30 years ago. They released updated mass numbers to patch over a massive hole in the official story before powerful new telescopes could look too closely at the outer system. The blue planet spinning 4 billion miles away is not a dead ball of gas. It is hiding a secret that changes everything. Now that you know what really happened during that deep space flyby, look out at the dark night sky with a completely different feeling tonight. We go through our daily lives assuming that the outer planets are just cold, quiet rocks drifting through empty space under simple laws of gravity. But the original records from file NRO-DOE89 prove that physical objects are sitting out there in the dark, generating power and holding their ground against brutal winds. The signal from Neptune was real, and the numbers were changed so you would never ask what is powering it. The real question you need to ask yourself as you look up at the stars tonight is not why the agency changed their mass calculations after 30 years of silence. The real question is, if a massive energy core has been sitting anchored inside Neptune's storms for decades, who put it there, and what is it waiting for out in the dark? Think about that as you watch the sky tonight, because the boundary protecting your peaceful view of the universe is much thinner than you were ever led to believe.